Welcome to another episode. Thank you so much for joining in. And today we are just going to be doing another deep dive into one little topic. So if you missed the previous episode, you can check it out. The last episode that we did, it was on toxic masculinity. And today I want to speak on provider expectations, right? And we can say so much around this. And I want to just start off by prefacing that there can be so many different conversations and spaces within this very topic that can be explored, but we're just going to keep it to one space so that we can just maybe explore one pocket as much as possible, right? And I want to start off by maybe putting it like this. As men, we're all called to be providers and to be responsible, right? This is something that is part of us as being men, right? And we actually get fulfillment from doing this, right? However, what I want to address is that we have, in my observation and in research, is that what I've seen is that we've kind of veered off in an extreme direction of it, where it can get unhealthy, where it can become burdensome. And so that is what, in the time we have today, I'm going to try and explore and address and see how do we find ourselves here and how do we come back to a place that is more healthy and a place that is more beneficial for what we are called to do and how we go about it. So let's jump straight into it. Firstly, just to address, how did we get here? And where's here? Here is, we at a place where the expectation, the burden that has been placed on men by society, their families, women in general, it is becoming to a place where it's just unbearable, to say the least, right? Some men are crumbling under this, right? Men are more so needing mental health, to see a therapist. Men are more likely to commit suicide. And there's a reason for this. There's fundamental reasons as to why we find ourselves in this place, right? So how did we get to this point? Well, just three things in my observation that I was just looking at. And like I said, even in the previous episode, and if you're just not, maybe it's the first time just hearing from me, one thing to know about me, I'm going to speak a lot about my family, because a lot of the things I'm going to be speaking about are things that I've also taken time and looked at in my family, looked at in my father's lineage, looked at in some of my peers as well and their families, and in other research that I just do extensively around the landscape of South Africa and even other societies in general across the world, right? So, how do we get here? Here's the first thing. Less men are present in the average household. I spoke about this earlier when we were talking about toxic masculinity. But as you can see, this is far-reaching. It doesn't only just go into toxic masculinity. It goes into so many different areas, right? And affects so many different areas of the average man's life. So, there are less men present in the average household. Why is this affecting us? Here's the thing. In the household I grew up in my grandmother's household. My grandfather was late. He died at a quite young age, unfortunately, and my mother was living with my grandmother. So suffice to say, my mother and my father did not get married, right? I know my father, even to this day I know him. I have had great memories with him. Our relationship has been quite rocky as well, but suffice to say, I know my father. I didn't grow up with him for most of my life, right? Particularly my early years, being a toddler, going into being a teen. In my high school years, then he was more in the picture, and then after high school as well, up until present, not so much. Okay, now, at home, what was the dynamic? At home, for the early first parts of my year, maybe from ages 1 till 7 or 8, if I can remember, my mother was unemployed. So, the breadwinner at home was my grandmother. My grandmother played a dual role in those seasons, being a mother and a father to me, taking care of me financially for the most part, right? Then later on, my mother was able to get a job, and then she assumed that responsibility as well and was taking care of me financially, because now she was in a position to be able to do so. Now, why am I saying this? The thing is, here, I remember at a young age, I don't know how old I was, but I remember at such that young age being in a female-dominated household. What I mean by that is, I was, for the most part, the only male in the house. I had two female cousins that I was living with in that house. My mother, my grandfather, my grandmother. And then my uncle, who was here and not there. He would come and go as he pleases, right? And so, for the most part, I felt like I need to be the man of the house. Mind you, no one told me this. No one said, Nthokozisi, you need to be the man of the house. But somehow, for some reason, I assumed this responsibility. It became worse in 2009 when my uncle passed away. Now it seemed like it's even more urgent. I need to be the man of this house. I need to be the protector of this house. Where did this come from? It came from somewhere, but I can tell you now, my mother never told me this. No person ever came and explicitly said this to me. But somehow, I assumed this on myself. And I have friends who can attest to at some point finding themselves saying similar things. Similar things such as, I need to take care of my siblings. I need to build a house for my mother. I need to buy a car for my mother. Where do these come from? They come from somewhere. But in most cases, it isn't because it was explicitly said by a family member, by a parent, or any other person. But somehow we find ourselves assuming this responsibility at such a young age, also might I add, right? And clearly there's an issue here. And when I saw there's an issue with this, was years later. I'm now a student in university, and I'm starting to really now plan and map out my life and put timelines to, how I want to build my life. And then I started realizing, wait a minute, some of these things that I aspire to do for my family, they're not going to be possible, not in the short term. And if I am going to execute this, that means my personal life, my success, my life going forward is going to be delayed. And I mean delayed by a number of years. Because I was talking about dreams like I want to build a house for my mother. That means it's going to be much later on when I can build my own house, right? And so observing this and looking at this, and I'm like, okay, I've said I want to do these things, but I can see that it's not going to happen as quickly as I thought it could, right? And it's a great thing, yes, I'd love to provide, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing, don't provide for your family, don't do that. Like, it is a great thing, and mostly it stems from a place of, you see the poverty, you see the economic status at home, and you then just have this desire that you actually want to make things better at home. That's a beautiful desire to have, right? It's a beautiful desire, and God willing, and He gives you the strength and you have the resources by all means, right? However, now I'm in this position and I'm realizing, hey, life is tougher than I thought it would be. And so I can see that it might not happen right now. As I speak to you right now, I don't have a house. So suffice to say, I haven't built a house for my mother, right? Would I love to? Absolutely. I would love to build a house for my mom, providing that the Lord wills it, right? I would love to do that. But it's not possible. It doesn't seem as possible, or it doesn't seem like it will happen in the time frame that it does. And then might I challenge as well? The question I'd want to challenge, and you can think about this, is it a fair expectation that your life as a man that you want to build, you probably want to get married, you probably want to have kids, you probably want to buy a car, you probably want to establish yourself. Is it valid, or is it supposed to be the case that your life must be on hold so that you sort out your family first and then come back to your life, right? I just want to submit that question to you, and maybe we can pick it up in another episode and talk about this a bit further, but that is something I started thinking about, right? And so less men are present in the household. What does this mean, less men are present in the household? It means that the generation wealth that will be passed from generation to generation is decreasing. Over the years, it's decreasing. It's at a decline. Why? Back in the day, there were more men present, right? There were men present in societies, right? And I'm talking about back in the day where the form of wealth was in cattle, was in the cows and the sheep and the goat that one has, right? Was in the land that one owns, right? And this was passed down. This was passed down. In African tradition, the son, the firstborn, would basically become the man of the household, when the father dies, right? And then they assume this and they build, ideally, they build on that wealth and they too pass it down and they too pass it down. Now what happened is that in modernization, people started preferring to be in the urban areas and less in the rural areas. What that meant was land was left. What this meant was that the cattle and the sheep, these things were left. Boys grew up wanting more to be in the urban areas and didn't want much to do with agriculture, right? And so already bit by bit, you found generational wealth falling away. You found it getting lost. You found it not having anyone to be a successor and to carry it on, right? And now we're at a place where men are not being as responsible in the household. Now things have become more difficult economically. Now men cannot carry the burden any longer of being the sole provider in a household, right? And so men have fallen away in the household. They've fallen away from responsibility. And who has picked up this responsibility? The women. They've picked up this responsibility. They've built legacies. They've built wealth. They've built something of their own. However, for some reason, when we still look at this, we don't see continuity. In my observation, what I've seen now in recent years is each person builds wealth for themselves. When they die, their kids start over. Or their kids' they start over. There isn't continuity. There isn't a legacy left behind for someone to then build onto that, right? So now there's this gap. The gap has widened. There's this gap. Each generation, you see with each generation that there's a need. Why is it that every generation comes into the picture and it's the mindset of I need to provide for my family? Why aren't they coming in already knowing this provision? Because someone has abdicated that responsibility. Someone along the line decided this is not for me, or I'm not going to do this, or I'm not going to take this on. And so a gap was left, and then you find another generation saying, let me build this again. A friend of mine would usually say something very interesting, this saying that tough times create tough people who create good times. And then good times creates weak people who create tough times. It's a very tough one to hear that one. But I find it to be so true in so many regards. In so many regards I find it to be true because this is what's happening. There's less wealth that is being passed from generation to generation. And so what's this leading to? My third point, it's leading to what? Young boys are self-imposing the responsibility of taking care of the household financially. I did this growing up. My best friend did this. Many of my close friends, I've seen these behaviors. And it's coming from a good place. I believe there is no morally upstanding man who does not want to see their family succeed, who does not want to see their family come out of poverty, come out of a hand-to-mouth situation and be in a place of abundance, be in a place of wealth generation. It's a great thing we want. It's a great thing we desire. But then we have taken it on. And I don't believe it's in the healthy way. I don't believe it is healthy to choose to say, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get my family right at the expense of your life, at the expense of what is your purpose and your calling in life. I don't believe that that is the healthy way of approaching it, right? And so, how do we resolve this? Two things I'm going to speak on. The first is that define what is your financial responsibility. And I'm speaking particularly when it comes to your family. Define your responsibility. And this is subjective for each person. That's what I'm saying, define yours. What it will be for me might not be the case for you. So you need to define for yourself. Don't let people define for you. You define for yourself what you are willing to take on as a responsibility in your capacity. Why am I saying this? Many times you've heard, like I did say earlier, that in some cases, and especially in my case, my mom never said, I want you to build me a house. She never said such a thing. I would be lying, right? But I know of some people whereby parents have said things along those lines. Things along the lines of, meaning, my child, we're now looking to you. That's a burden. That's a burden you place on a child when you say such. right? And maybe coming from a good place, maybe coming from a place of, we've struggled so much in life, you are now our hope. But it is a burden. We need to understand the weight that is being placed on these individuals. So define for yourself what you're willing to take on as a financial responsibility. You may be saying, I want to pay for my sisters and my brothers' school tuitions when I work. That is something you are agreeing to. You're agreeing to take it on as a responsibility, and so you then need to fulfill that obligation. You need to hold yourself accountable to that, but define it for yourself. Yours might be, I want to ensure my family will never go hungry, and so whenever there's a need, whenever there's food lacking at home, I'm making sure there's going to be food at home. I'm making sure that fridge doesn't run empty. If that is something you're willing to take on, and it's not going to be burdensome, it is something you're willing to do and it's coming from a willing heart, then you can do that and you hold yourself accountable to that, right? And that's the key point. I'm saying define for yourself what financial responsibilities you're going to take on so that you can hold yourself accountable. Because here's the thing, what I've seen throughout the years is that burdens are placed on people. Family members are saying this. Someone is speaking this into your life. And then you take it on and you're burdened by this because it's not coming from a willing place. It wasn't something you just sat with and say, I would love to do this. The reason why I sit here even now and I still say I would love to build my mother a house is because my mother never said she wants it. My mother never said she expects this. I desire to do this. And God willing, I will. Right? So you define what is your financial responsibility. And the second point is piggybacking off of that one. Differentiate between obligation and generosity. In one of the earlier episodes I shot with my best friend Mfundo, we spoke around this, right? Particularly when we're looking at the African household. Many times, often we have seen that these burdens, they've been placed as obligations. And I'll explain what I mean by this. You get your first job, and then you, in most African cultures, it's become that customary thing that that first salary goes to your family, right? As a way of honoring, as a way of just, honoring your parents and just saying thank you for everything, recognizing them as being pivotal parts in your success, in your advancements in life, in your career, that kind of stuff. And so we do this gesture of taking the first salary straight home, right? Now, say you decide you're earning 20,000 Rand a month, and you decide that every month you are going to give your mother 5,000 Rand. Your mother and your father, you're going to send 5,000 Rand at home and they can use it as they please, right? And without fail, every month you're sending that 5,000 Rand. Here's what happens. That 5,000 Rand started off as a gift, a generosity, an act of generosity to say, hey, I would just love to bless you with this. But here's what inevitably happens. What inevitably happens is that your parents would then, in their budgeting, include this 5,000 Rand. So this act of generosity ends up becoming part of their financial planning. And so should a time come when you cannot give that 5,000 Rand for whatever reasons, right? Or maybe just for this month, you actually can't give that 5,000 Rand because there was maybe you had a medical emergency and so you had to reroute your funds. This doesn't land well at home because now you've messed up their budget. And so something that started off as generosity ends up becoming an obligation. Now they expect you to send this because this 5,000 Rand goes towards the groceries or it goes towards paying off your father's car. And now it's no longer generous. Now it can end up not even coming from a good place. Now you're feeling a burden that I always need to do this. And here's the toxic place. Here's the dangerous place. You're now getting married. Your life is changing. However, they might still expect this 5,000 Rand. Or now you have kids. Now you're buying your own place. Or you're moving out of the house and you're just going to rent. But if you've made something that was meant to be generosity and it became an obligation, it became something that is expected, it becomes difficult to then change that. And so this is why, again, I say, define for yourself the financial responsibility you're willing to take on, and be clear about it. Be clear. Be clear to say, Mom, this year I am going to help you with this. What are you saying by saying that? You're saying there's a start and an end. This year I'm going to do this at home. There's a start and an end. Right? Mom, this month I'm going to help you out in this way. You are defining it. It's specific. There's a start and an end. You are staying away from it being an obligation and it being generosity. Because here's the thing. The Bible says God blesses a cheerful giver. You want to give from a place of willingness, a place of wanting to be generous, not a place of feeling obligated. All right. And so I want to leave you with this one quote from the Bible which says, a father leaves an inheritance for his children. Men, this is part of our responsibility as men. We are men who are supposed to take responsibility. Take responsibility in your family. Take responsibility in your household. Leave a legacy, not just for your children, but generations after you. That is a man who leads as he should. And so I hope you're encouraged. And men, please be intentional. Remember that the man you are becoming is better than the man you are today. We hope you enjoyed that episode and that you found it valuable and worth your time. Hey, and if you did so enjoy it, why don't you hit that like button and also subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so. And also, if you haven't shared it, share it to someone who you know will find this information very valuable. Hey, we have a goal and we'd love to reach 1,000 subscribers by the end of this year. And so we'd really appreciate it if you can assist with sharing the word and spreading the word out there. And we hope you'll be part of this journey. Also, drop a comment below. We read every single comment that is posted, and we would really love to hear your feedback and your thoughts. Your feedback is also very valuable and appreciated. It helps our team so that we can bring you even better content. And with that said, please rate our show wherever you are consuming it, on whichever different platform. Thanks for being part of this journey. We appreciate you.